Good evening. So let's start our current affair. Wait a second. So again, welcome back to your current affair class. So let's start. The first topic of today current affair class is WTO may ease curbs on Indian grain exports. Now you can relate this topic with your economy part. In your economy, you will read there is one topic about international organization. And WTO is an international organization. Whatever the challenges in front of India to export food grains to different part of the world, why US time to time filing a case in WTO against India for providing a subsidies to its farmer. So it is always a controversial topic about Indian agriculture and WTO. So WTO stands for World Trade Organization, may ease curbs on Indian grain exports. So now Indian can export grains to different part of the world. Okay. So why it was in news? Recently it was in news because of Russia-Ukraine war. Okay. So Russia-Ukraine war was the main reason behind for why it was sanctioned on to export some of the food grains from India. So WTO is looking into resolving its rules that are making it difficult for India to export food grains to meet shortage in other countries caused by Russia-Ukraine war. Okay. So what are the issues and challenges? This is very important. You will prepare one question for mains exam from this topic. मेंस एग्जाम के लिए फ्रॉम यहाँ से क्वेश्चन आने के चांसेस बहुत ज्यादा हैं. WTO and agriculture, this is one of the favorite topic of UPSC. Whether they will ask in prelims or in mains exam or even in your interview, maybe the interview board member can ask you a question. What is your opinion? What should be a subsidies a government of India should given to a farmer so that it will follow all the guidelines of WTO, and also we will able to fulfill our target, that is doubling of farmer income by 2022. Okay. So what are the issues and challenges? So WTO rules make it difficult for a country to export grains from official stocks if these have been procured from producer at a fixed price. Okay, instead of market rate. So in India, what is the scenario? In India, basically government announced minimum support price for maximum number of crops. And what is the main motive behind for announcement of minimum support price? Basic idea is to give a farmers whatever financial means expenditure they have done while cultivation of crops, that will able to get them back. Okay, it is not like completely lost. That's why minimum support price is announced by the government. So if government is procured a food grain by minimum support price, that food grain should not be exported to other country. Okay, WTO का rule कहता है, if you are buying a market rate, suppose market rate is 25 rupees per kg rice, basmati rice, just for example, 25 rupees per kg, this is the market price, and government procured by just rupees 12 rupees, Okay, 10 to 12 rupees per kg. So if in this case government will procure more and more food grains, that government not allowed to export to different part of the world. Okay, so export by private traders who buy grain from farmer at a market rate are not impacted by WTO norms. Okay, private traders, okay, they are basically buy food grains from the farmer at a market rate. Okay, so this is not the violation of the norms that, or rules and regulation that is given by WTO. But government is buying up food grains from the farmer at a minimum support price, and that is not accepted by the WTO rule. WTO says if you want to export, okay, you can buy at a market rate. Okay, so that it will be equality. Okay, it will be like a trade barrier type. These are called trade barrier, or challenging the export items of a developed country like US and European country. Okay, next is Russia's military offensive in Ukraine severely hamper wheat export from both countries, which collectively account for more than a quarter of global supply of the commodity. Okay, so it was like a wheat जो export हो रहा था वो कहीं ना कहीं hamper हुआ because of two countries engaged in a war, and they are more than a quarter of global supply. Both the countries together export a huge quantity of wheat to different part of the world. Now, issues of quality के बारे में बात आता है. Fears remain that the quality of shipment and logistics could hold back the Indian economy from achieving its full market potential. In India, what are the backward problems? Like we have very less number of cold storage. Okay, geographically, our country lack a groundwater resources. Irrigation problems अभी भी हमारे country में काफी है. So that also affect the quality of food grains. We are not, mostly farmers are not using high yielding varieties of seeds. They are not using any type of chemical fertilizers. Okay, they instead depend on monsoon rainfall, manures that they can prepare in their house. Okay, so impurities in some of India's produce means that some buyers are wary of sourcing wheat from the country. The quality determines whether the grain can be used for making food products or not. So quality is very important. Okay, so you are selling the product at a cheaper price and the quality is not good. Obviously that will be hamper the WTO norms. Okay, low profit. The sector has struggled with profitability in recent years, making it even more critical for India to capitalize on this opportunity. So low profit is one part here, because if suppose there is a requirement of 10 kg rice in all over the world, for example 10 kg rice पूरे world में चाहिए, and out of the 10 kg India is supplying 3 kg rice, US is supplying half kg, other countries are supplying other half kg. So in that case India is supplying more amount of food grain, but they are not gaining its profit. Okay, US is not able to supply its food grain in those countries where India already exported it with a very cheap price, and the quality is also not good. So that again hamper the WTO norms that said that a quality of food, equality should be maintained. That's why the reason why US always time to time file a case against the Indian government regarding export of food grains and some of the agricultural subsidies that provide by the government of India to the farmer of country. Now the supply crunch has pushed global wheat prices to record high in recent time, because of there is decrease in supply of food grains because of two countries that engaged in a war, Ukraine and Russia. So with little or no prospect of de-escalation in the short to medium term, supply scenario is not going to improve anytime. Okay, it's not going to improve anytime, soon putting wheat importing nation in a tight spot. Okay, so inflation in domestic market is also happened. As export reduce India's stock, this could push up the price of grain by 8 to 10% on the year. So this would make wheat more expensive for household already struggling with rising food prices. which have propelled India's retail inflation to close to 7%. So inflation will be a one important reason behind for. Okay, there has also been a fall in the crop yield and shrunken the grain size. Grain size is also shrunken crop yield because of lack of irrigation, lack of uh, development by the farmer sides. Okay, for example, in the state of Punjab, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, due to excessive heat and improper use of fertilizer and pesticides, that cause a decrease in the crop production and shrunken the grain size. So insufficient port infrastructure. Okay, insufficient port infrastructure, port facility is also not good in our country, so that it can be handle a more products for exporting to other part of the world. So insufficient port infrastructure, that's why government started Sagar Mala project. So Sagar Mala project का main idea क्या है? Sagar Mala project port infrastructure पे focus करना. How we can improve the port infrastructure so that if our export and import will be improved, then our internal economy will also improve. So insufficient port infrastructure to cater to surging demand as well as higher freight cost could prove the obstacles. So what India's wheat production and export? We'll talk about a condition of India's wheat production and export. So agriculture GDP. About half of India's population depend on agriculture for their livelihood, and the sector account for 20% of country's GDP. Okay, so half of the India's population is still 50-55% of the population of India depend on agriculture. Okay, engaged in agriculture activities, and agriculture sector account 20% of the country's GDP. Now, Russia was the world's largest wheat exporter. Before the war in Ukraine, Russia was the world's largest wheat exporter, and Ukraine is the fifth, according to World Bank data. Now, Russia accounts 17.6% of the global share of wheat export revenue. Now, what is the share of India? So, India accounts just 0.5% of wheat export in 2020, despite it being the world's second biggest grower of the commodity, because internal consumption is very high. Okay, it produces more than 100 million tons of wheat per year, placing it second only to China. So consumption data में बात करते हैं कि why despite second biggest grower of wheat all over the world, India's share is just 0.5% because of very high internal consumption. So country's wheat supply for the year will reach 147 million tons, while domestic consumption increase is forecast 105 million tons. So total wheat supply of the country is 147 million tons, और उसमें से 105 million tons is only internal domestic consumption, and rest 42 million tons you can say exported to different part of the world. So India offered a supply grains to other countries that are facing food shortage should WTO norms allow it. So WTO norms allow in that case when India is helping to other countries for fighting against the shortage of foods. Why it is significant for India that WTO is easing norms for exporting the wheat to different part of the world? Now this will be a very good opportunities for India. Why? Now the opportunity include the export of food grains such as wheat and the possibility of manufactured good being exported destination for which supply had become unreliable. So if we will export more and more product, we will able to earn more in a dollar, and this will strengthen our foreign exchange reserve. Okay, so foreign exchange reserve India ka jo, that will be improved. Surplus in production, India has reached out more than 20 countries regarding exporting wheat and is targeting record 50 million tons of wheat for export this year. So India is expected to have a surplus this year, producing more than 111 million tons of the crop. So maybe this year we have a surplus of the crops. Surplus crop means after means fulfilling all the demand of internal, whatever the left for supply to other part of the world, that is called surplus. Okay, surplus production. So there are already sign of increased purchases of wheat by private traders. Okay, giving the lucrative export market. These are some important point. Cost of Indian wheat is comparatively lower While there has been a surge in global prices, India's wheat rate is relatively competitive. Export to other countries. In recent years, the India has mainly exported wheat to countries including Bangladesh, which receive about half of the India's shipment of the grain, the UAE and Sri Lanka. So United Arab Emirates, Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. So new destination for India is new promising export avenue for opening up, and several countries including Turkey, Lebanon are potential new major growth market for India. So Egypt, which is the biggest importer of wheat from Russia and Ukraine, has already approved India as a supplier. So India get a new market. Okay, and that new market will helpful for India to fight different challenges in our country. Okay. So what should Indian government do in future so that our export always be a sustainable and be able to adopt new technology from the other countries also, so that we can improve our agriculture economy. So way forward हम बात करते हैं enormous opportunity to India. The current supply gap present an enormous opportunity to India to export its agriculture potential and boost wheat exports. Because you know the two biggest supplier of wheat of the world, Ukraine and Russia, both engaged in a war. Now, you know, these countries very close a sea called Caspian Sea, Red Sea. Okay, Mediterranean Sea is very close to these countries. So obviously it will be affect the India's foreign policy also. Okay, so it will be long-term exporter. We must focus on becoming a long-term exporter to these countries, and ensure this we need to export only good quality wheat to them. So government has outlined the plan to send trade delegation to countries including Morocco, Tunisia, the Philippines, Vietnam, Turkey and Lebanon. So what they will do, trade delegation will go and they will ease out all the type of trade barriers. Suppose a country like Morocco is not allowing any single product from foreign country to India. So that will be a one problem. The government has outlined the plan to send trade delegation to country like all this, so that it will be easy ease out the all the norms, so that a permanent export of the product from India should be always a one case. Okay, so this is the end of the first topic. Now we'll move to the next, called blue straggler stars. What is called blue straggler stars? Very, very important for prelims point of view. So this is from the science and technology. Okay. So let's first focus on why it was in news recently. So recently, scientists at Indian Institute of Astrophysics, Bengaluru, have found support for one way to understand the peculiarity about blue straggle star. This is somewhere you can say the part of astronomy. Astronomy is like where we talk about the comets, asteroids. Okay, then what are meteorites? What are different types of celestial bodies? Space में जो बातें हो रही हैं उनको that will come under astronomy. Now the researchers also made use of observation by UVIT instrument. It is called Ultraviolet Imaging Telescope of AstroSat, India's first science observatory in space. Okay, so in prelims they can ask you blue straggler stars क्या है? And recently blue straggler stars was in news. Which of the following statement is correct? So let's talk about the what is blue straggler stars. So they are a class of stars on open or globular cluster that stand out as they are bigger and blur bluer than the rest of the star. So they are blue color और सबसे bigger भी होंगे rest of the star. They have intrigued scientists who have for long probed this origin. So it is found in old star clusters and appears to be lagging behind most of the other stars. In the cluster is evolution towards cooler, reddish, and state. So it's showing the one of the stages of the evolutions, like when it took born and then towards the cooler, reddish state hona. Reddish state means no supernova mode में आना. But blue struggle tend to be strongly considered towards the center of the cluster. So cluster means here like a group of stars. वो सारे stars के बीच में होगा. Okay, and that will be more blue in color. It will be not shining as much. Now, how this blue star struggler formation? Formation कैसे होता है blue star का? This is very important to know. So a bunch of stars born at the same time for the same cloud from star clusters. So you know the term is called nebula. Nebula is a cloud, is a group of clouds, group of dust, gases, all combined together at a very dense part. That is called a nebula. So a bunch of stars born at the same time from the same cloud from star cluster. As time passes, each star evolved differently depending on its mass, because these stars have not the same size, they're different size. So evolve. The most massive and bright star evolved and move off the main sequence, creating a bend in their track known as turn off. Okay, so most star which is massive and bright star, जो सबसे massive होगा, evolve and move off main sequence, creating a bend in their track known as turn off. The star above this bend or brighter and hotter stars are not expected in cluster as they leave the main sequence to become a red giants. Okay, so this is like a group of stars. We mean in the group of the most massive hoga, bright star, that will be come out from the clusters. Okay, and that will become a red giants. Okay, in 1955, Alan Sandels found that some stars seem to be hotter than the turn off the parent clusters. So they are more hotter because they are more size. Initially, this blue star is still straggling above the turn off, were not part of this cluster. Okay, so this blue star still straggling above the turn off were not part of this cluster. However, later studies confirm that these stars are indeed clusters member, as they were termed as blue stragglers. So in prelims, maybe they can ask you question about blue straggler के बारे में. So why it was study so important, and what was the exact study? They do not belong to the family of star in the cluster, and hence are not expected to have a group properties. So because they became a new and more giant, more massive and brighter, and they become a red giant. But if they are actually belong to the group, the evasive behavior is due to this star gaining mass from binary companion. Okay, they will gain a more mass from the nearby stars. And the straggle draws matter from the giant companion star and grow more massive, hot and blue, and the red giant to end up as normal or smaller white dwarf. Okay, the straggle drawn matter from the giant companion star and grow more massive, hot and blue, and the red giant to end up as a normal or smaller white dwarf. The straggler draw matter from the companion star, but there is a third star that facilitates this process. So Indian Institute of Astrophysics researchers have shown evidence that support the second of the hypothesis listed above. So why this study is important for knowing the blue straggler stars? The study will help improve the understanding of this stellar system to uncover existing results in the study of large stellar population, including galaxies. Okay, group of stars, galaxies का क्या formation हुआ, ऐसे origin हुआ, because we know the origin of solar systems, we know the origin of planets, but what about the cluster of stars, how they are born, how the galaxy is born? So that will be, this study will be helpful to know the method and process. Okay, now next important news is called carbon pricing. So you can relate this news with your environment. Okay, environment relate कर सकते हैं, and this is again very important for your prelims point of exam. Okay, so what is carbon pricing? Carbon pricing होता क्या है? So carbon pricing, it is an instrument that captures the external cost of greenhouse gas emission and link it to their source through the price in the form of a price on the carbon dioxide emitted. Okay, so it is like a greenhouse gas emissions. And what is the source of the emission of greenhouse gas? Okay, and it is like, if suppose the greenhouse gas emission is from the motor vehicles. Okay, motor vehicles से है. Then also we know the carbon capturing. Okay, carbon capturing, carbon sequestration. What is carbon sequestration? Carbon sequestration is the method where we can capture the carbon dioxide and take it to a very deep inside the earth, or we can store in a very packed instrument so that it cannot come out. So it is like a not allowing a carbon dioxide reach in the atmosphere. Okay, so it is like a, that is called carbon pricing. So what will be the cost of capturing such a carbon dioxide and through their source, through a price in the form of price on the carbon dioxide emitted? So this measure a burden of emissions and its effect is shifted to those who are producing it. This further discourages the producer from emitting greenhouse gas recklessly. So it is a one, you can say, initiative. It will be put a pressure on those who are produce the carbon dioxide. Wait a second. Okay, so carbon pricing, we are dealing with the carbon pricing. So carbon pricing means what will be the cost of capturing the carbon dioxide that is emitted from the a given source. That is called a carbon pricing. So through this measure, the burden of emission and its effect is shifted to those who are producing it. For example, automobile company who are manufacturing a motor vehicle or car, and because they are using such a machines that can burn fuels and cause the emission of carbon dioxide. So this is the responsibility of the manufacturing company to use such a things in the car engine so that it will be capture the carbon dioxide. It is not allowed to emit outside. Okay, so this further discourages the producer from emitting greenhouse gas recklessly. So it is in pursuance with the Kyoto Protocol and Paris Agreement of United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which aims at limiting the greenhouse gas emission, avoid extreme weather conditions, and limit the temperature of Earth to 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2050. Because you will read a IPCC report. IPCC report clearly warned the world that if we will not take action seriously, we will not take the action, then obviously the average temperature of the Earth will be increases very sharply. There will be a melting of the glaciers, sea level will be rise, migration of people will start from islands area to a continent, and also there will be extinction of animals, shortage of food supply. So it will be cause a further increase of dangerous diseases. So that's why a very important action is required. So has the carbon pricing served its purpose? So carbon pricing is seen as an effective tool to limit greenhouse gas emissions because it is direct give up responsibility on the producers. अगर प्रोड्यूसर को ज्यादा टैक्सेस पे करना होगा, so obviously he will find some alternate way to how to reduce the fossil fuels and what are the method for decreasing in emission of greenhouse gas. Now it has led to the internationalization of externalities, thus leading to polluters owing the responsibility and acting on it on various sectors. So however, the extreme weather conditions have not stopped, and there is a various sectors. Okay, however, the extreme weather conditions have not stopped. So there is a global rise in temperature. So what are the reasons for carbon pricing not realizing its full potential? Because this method was not able to get at its result because it was formed to reduce the greenhouse gas emission. Lekin greenhouse gas continuously increase ho raha, not from India but all over the world also. Okay, now reason for carbon pricing not realizing its full potential is first, the member country have not obliged to their commitment. Like time to time USA not follow Kyoto Protocol also, from Paris Agreement also US came out. US ने बोला कि I will not support this type of agreement where a concession is given to developing country like India and China, because India and China are the largest producer of greenhouse gas emission all over the world. So they take their own responsibility. Okay, so the member country have not obliged to their commitment under Paris Agreement faithfully, keeping their development need first, thus sidelining the sustainability premise. The developing world does not have required fund to upgrade their technology for sustainable development also. Okay, because technology is very important for decreasing the use of greenhouse gas into the atmosphere. Okay, like political economy, the primarily in the developing world has forced the political class to go slow on sustainable transition. Hence, the technology in agriculture, manufacturing has remained mostly the same or has moved at snail's pace. Developed countries have not kept their promise of COP16, Accord of Climate Financing, under which they were required to contribute $100 billion annually for sustainable projects in the developing world. Okay, they are not fulfill their commitment. And reversing climate change requires holistic changes like carbon pricing alone cannot be answer to climate change. It has served its purpose in limited capacities because of the above mentioned reason. Now, what are the different types of carbon pricing? Okay, like there are different way of decreasing the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. They are putting pressure on the manufacturer and producers. Like first is emission trading system. So under this mechanism, emitters can trade emissions unit to meet their emission targets. The emitter can either implement internal abatement measures or acquire emission unit on the in the carbon market, like just like a carbon credit. Okay, suppose USA annually produces 100 ton कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड, ठीक है, 100 टन कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड एनुअली प्रोड्यूस कर रहा है, एंड यूएसए मींस इमिटेड कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड मोर देन इट्स गिवन लिमिट. उसका 100 टन लिमिट दिया गया है, बट इट इमिटेड 150 टन एनुअली. सो दिस एक्स्ट्रा 50 टन US is emitting, that 50 ton must be reduced from developing country. How? So USA will do a investment in developing country for installation of solar energy, renewable source of energy. Okay, so that this type of country not emit carbon dioxide, they use a renewable source of energy, and that 50 ton extra 50 ton will give a permission again to the US to emit. तो कहीं ना कहीं कहने का मतलब है कि if you are in means emitting more than your limit, then that you can reduce to any other part of the world. Compensation करना उसको. You can if you are geographically you are located in a high latitude area where sunlight is not available properly, so you can do investment in those countries who are in a tropical area, so they can use solar energy. Avoid to use fossil fuel for those countries. If those countries will be use a renewable source of energy, कहीं ना कहीं carbon dioxide emission कहीं ना कहीं से कम होगा. That is called emission trading system. So there are two main types of emission trading system, like cap and trade and baseline and credit. Cap and trade. Okay, so cap and trade, like we will limit our emission of carbon dioxide. So cap and trade system क्या होता है? Under this mechanism, a limit on the emissions is put and emission allowance are distributed through auction or the amount of emission equivalent to the cap. Okay, baseline and credit system क्या है? Here a baseline emission level is set and credit are issued to entities that have reduced their emission below this base level. This credit can be sold to other entities exceeding their baseline emission levels. So cap and trade means you can put a cap, that much is the limit, not allowed to further emission of carbon dioxide. If you are doing so, you can do a investment. Okay, so this type of mechanism that will help to reduce the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and also help in transformation of technology from one country to another country, because you know technology is very important for reducing the effect of carbon dioxide. Okay, now carbon tax is, you know, in India also carbon tax. This is directly given to the government if we are using a more fossil fuels. So under the mechanism, an explicit tax rate on greenhouse gas emission is set. Okay, you are using more coal, so you have to pay more tax. So it depends on how much carbon dioxide we emit from a given source. Then offset mechanism, carbon offset mechanism. What is carbon offset mechanism? The protocol predetermines the greenhouse gas emission reduction for projects. The emission certificate can then be sold to the emitters who could not meet the emission norms. Like China, India are mostly engaged in such type of offset mechanism. Okay, so that they will able to receive an investment from the developed country. This country wants a technology transfer for installation of renewable source of energy, so that they can limit their emission target. Then result-based climate finance. The result-based climate finance is an instrument through which payments are made after predefined outcomes pertaining to managing climate change. So internal carbon pricing, it is an entity which an entity uses internally to guide its decision-making process in relation to climate change impact, risk and opportunities. So these all are very important for Plin's point of view. You can use in an answer writing also. Now, different countries have different carbon pricing because every country not use the same amount of fossil fuels. Like different countries deploy different types of carbon pricing on the basis of national circumstances and political realities. So, under mandatory carbon pricing initiative, emission trading service and carbon taxes are the most common type of instrument which emitting entities follow. So, choice of carbon pricing is in alignment with the broader national and economic priority and institutional capacities. For example, in India, we lack of technologies, we lack economic resources, so that we cannot do investment in other part of the areas. So, in that case, a developed country must be helped India for installation of such type of technologies, so that we are able to use more renewable source of energy instead of fossil fuels. So in India, there is no specific carbon tax, but there are a host of other mechanisms to limit the climate change, such as perform, achieve and trade scheme है, coal cess है India में, renewable purchase obligation है, renewable energy certificate है, and internal carbon pricing है. So this is very important for Plin's point of view. Which of the following is not an initiative in India for reducing the carbon emission? तो पैट है स्कीम, कोल से रिन्यूएबल परचेज ऑब्लिगेशन है, रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी सर्टिफिकेट एंड इंटरनल कार्बन प्राइसिंग. Now you can expect a question in mains exam in a more advanced level and prelims also. Prelims में भी देखोगे question whatever the UPSC is asking, that is not easy, or you cannot answer by reading only one book. So you must read a current affair, and at the same time you always revise your basic part. So basic part का revision करना भी important है. Now we'll move to a new topic called from international relation called Resina Dialogue 2022. Resina Dialogue 2022. Okay, so what exactly this dialogue? What talk about a very important part of your international relation. So recently, the 7th edition of the Resina Dialogue was held in New Delhi. Okay, many of the new IS officers who just means under the training all also attended this session. So Resina Dialogue 2020 क्या है? The theme of for the conference was Terra Nova, Impassioned, Impatient, Imperialized. Okay, the name of the conference का theme क्या था? Terra Nova, Impassioned, Impatient, Imperialized. So what exactly this means? It had 6 thematic pillars. Okay, first is rethinking democracy. Rethinking democracy means trade, technology and ideology. What should be the trade? New rules for the trade, new technologies, and what should be the new ideology? What should be the approach of the government? Okay, then end of multilateralism, a new and networked global order. End of multilateralism को खत्म करना है. Water caucuses, turbulent tides in the Indo-Pacific. Communities inclusive, first responded to health, development and planet. Then achieving green transitions, common imperative, diverging realities. Then Samsung versus Goliath, the persistent and relentless technology wars. Okay, it's like a technology wars. See the theme of this year Resina Dialogue. The Resina Young Fellow Program was also conducted along with the conference. So what is this dialogue exactly? Resina Dialogue is India's premier foreign policy conference on geopolitics and geoeconomics, committed to addressing the most challenging issue facing the global community. So it is India's premier foreign policy conference about the geopolitics like Indo-Pacific region. Okay, then talk about the Red Sea areas. We talk about the border areas, India and neighboring countries. Trade routes. What should be the trade route? Most challenging issue facing the global community. The first session was held in 2016. It was okay. So it is organized on the line of Shangri-La Dialogue, which takes place annually in Singapore and is co-hosted by Ministry of External Affairs and the Observer Research Foundation. The name Resina Hills come from the place where India's seat of power resides. So it is an area in Delhi where Rashtrapati Bhavan, the Prime Minister office, and other important government offices are situated. Okay, so this is an initiative of the Indian government, a foreign policy where India can talk about the global issues. About what are the geopolitics, geoeconomics के बारे में बात कर सकते हैं. Talking about the India world trades, what should be the new policy so that equality should be maintained. Geopolitical issues like quadrilateral security dialogue जो बना है India, US, Japan, Australia का, they can able to talk about these problems and challenges in front of India to do a free and fair trade through Indo-Pacific region. How to counter China in economic world, that all discussed under Resina dialogue. Now, what are the important takeaway that decision came out from this dialogue? The conference had deliberation on host of issues plaguing the international community. Certain important deliberations were on economy and finance. Economy and finance के बारे में बात हुआ regarding the ring fencing the global financial flows and mechanisms from political blockages, securing supply of rare earth minerals and semiconductor to ensure the spread of sustainable quality infrastructure. Okay. Role of Quad in carving new economic architecture for the Indo-Pacific region. Measures to reverse deglobalization. Banking the next 2 billion, the future of digital banking, and authoritarian regimes determined pursuit of tech supremacy and perils of the big techs. So you see all the important issues right now India is facing, that all discussed in field of economy and finance. So ring fencing the global financial flow, supply of rare earth materials like semiconductors, so that we will able to make a high advanced technology like artificial intelligence, okay, blockchain technology, that will help to solve multiple problems. So these are some important points where discussion was happened. Then also health area, the ways through which the international community can ensure the supply lines essential to health and food security. Because in COVID-19, we already know how our health infrastructure was very far behind, you can say that, as compared to other countries. We are not able to handle such a pandemic. So there is supply of essential things. Energy, ensuring the maritime nations play an instrumental role in shaping the new low carbon development strategy, while also dealing with biodiversity preservation, the cost of adaptation, and with debt burdens worsened by the COVID-19 pandemic. Then talk about the geopolitical. So measures through which the India can strengthen the WT to W20 during the G20 presidency. So role of America in the wake of Afghanistan debacle and a Ukraine crisis. Measures to sustain the post-World War concessions with the current role of America. Okay, see, these are the some already happened and this not completed. ये जो हुआ, their consequences still seen in many part of the world, including India. Okay, so ways through which Africa can contribute to a new economic order led by women and strengthened through diversity and inclusions. Okay, measures to harmonize the global gateway project like Belt and Road Initiative, Build Back Better World Initiative, along with political tensions associated. These are some important initiatives. And then talk about the COVID-19 pandemic. So measures to build self-reliance and bring business back to track in the aftermath of COVID-19. This is the way to boost economic recovery and sustainability in the post-pandemic economic architecture. Channeling infrastructure capital to serve both strategic aims and developing nations' need for resilience and self-reliance. Okay. Given more focus on women, role of women leadership in securing the sustainable development goals, empowering women post COVID-19 and unlocking their potential for accelerated development. So what are the significance of this Raisina dialogue? So with the first session in 2016, the Raisina dialogue has grown in stature and profile to emerge as a leading global conference on international affairs. It brings together leaders from the global strategic and policy making community to discuss key geopolitical development and strategy issues facing the world. Now, the theme every year at the conference is aligned to issues of utmost importance for the global community. And the brainstorming ensuing helps policymakers across countries to think with their policy design to rectify the issues. So in exam, they can ask you in mains exam about to write a significance of Raisina dialogue and how India more participate in world affairs, or dominance of India will be increases, or how with the help of Raisina dialogue India proved its we can say that seriousness about the thinking about world issues and find a permanent seat in United Nations Security Council. Who will become a permanent member? Those who will have economically strong, dominant in their policies, that will be that country will be eligible to become a permanent member. So that will help India to show its image that it is a responsible country. Not only think about its India's internal matter, but also focus on external matter. Now, recently, one new report called India's labor force participation rate अभी पास हुआ है. Okay. So why in news? Recently, data from the Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, India's labor force participation rate has fallen just 40% from already low 47 in 2016. So India's labor force का ना हो गया है 40%. And who published this report? Center for Monitoring Indian Economy. So this suggests not only that more than half of India's population is the working age population, years and older, is deciding to sit out the job market, but also the proportion of people is increasing. So what is this labor force participation rate? So according to this Center of Monitoring Indian Economy, the labor force consists of people who are aged 15 years or older and belong to either of the following two categories. First, are employed, and those who are unemployed and are willing to work and are actively looking for a job. So these two will come under the labor force. So these two categories have people demanding jobs. This demand is what labor force participant rate refers to. Okay. So these two important condition is very like unemployed bhi hai jo, and they are willing to work, and those who are employed also. So labor force participation rate is essentially the percentage of the working age 15 years or older population that is asking for a job. Okay, they have quality to become to quality, but they are not able to get a job. It represents the demand for jobs in the economy. कितना जो economy में demand है job का. It includes those who are employed and those who are unemployed, both. Okay, and the unemployment rate, which is routinely quoted in the news, is nothing but a number of unemployed category 2 as a proportion of the labor force. So in India, the labor force participation rate is not only lower than in the rest of the world, but also falling. In India, it has been sliding over the last 10 years and has shrunk from 47 to just 40% of December 2021. So why this labor force participation rate is so low in India? Maybe they can ask in your prelims. Now, the main reason here, India's labor force participation rate being low is the abysmally low level of female low labor force participation rate. So according to CMIE data, as of December 2021, the male labor force participation rate is 67.4 and the female is 9.4%. In other words, less than 1 in 10 working age women in India are even demanding work. So even if one source data from the World Bank, India's female labor force participation rate is around 25% when the global average is 47%. So what government should do? Government should have to increase the employment opportunity in our country. Okay, and the reason for low women labor force participation rate is essentially about the working conditions, such as law and order, efficient public transportation, violence against women, societal norms. These are the reasons behind for less labor force participation rate in women. So being far from conducive for women to seek work, for the lot of women in India are exclusively involved within their own homes, caring for their family. Already they are educated, but all they are engaged in their family work. Now, what is issue with labor force participation rate calculation? First is unemployment rate only measures person who are unemployed, but it did not calculate the total people who have stopped demanding work. Okay. Typically, this happens when people of the working age get disheartened from not finding a work. Thus, it is better to track another variable, the employment rate. So, employment rate refers to the total number of employed people as a percentage of the working age population. Now, what should be the way forward? Promoting labor-intensive industries. Okay, where a more and more employment generation. So there are several labor-intensive manufacturing sectors in India, such as food processing, leather, footwear, wood manufacturers and furnitures, textile and apparel and garments. So these are the areas where labor force will be more participative. Special packages individually designed from each industry are needed to be create jobs. Okay, so another important news article is child and adolescent healthcare system of the world. So why it was in the news? Recently, a series of child and adolescent healthcare system of the world was published in the Lancet Global Health Journal. Okay, so Lancet Global Health Journal में recently released हुआ था report. A series of 4 papers set out the current position with the gain that have been made globally, which point out the stark variation in the global scenario, with some nations showing more marked improvement than the others. So according to estimate, 8.62 million deaths occurred between 28 weeks of gestation and 20 years of age in 2019. Okay, stillbirth and neonatal deaths, 23%, 28% respectively, together accounted for half of this death, while another 1/3 of the death occurred in children between the 1 month and 5 years of age. Because they are not able to get a proper diet, nutrient problem, medical facilities are not able to get, their mother are not able, their deficiency of iron, anemia. So it record the advancement and contributing to fall in child mortality and morbidity. Okay. So, however, there are huge inequities, and several children and adolescents do not thrive or survive because of low cost intervention are not deployed their benefits. Okay, government not taking any action. Okay, and that result more death happened after the born of children. So impact of pandemic is clearly visible here. COVID-19 pandemic showed the devastating effect that gaps in care and education can have on children. Health and social system must be better equipped to work together to address the emerging needs of children and family as part of the effort to rebuild equitable and resilient services. Now, the challenges faced in responding to the need of the children and family during COVID-19 pandemic should serve as a wake-up call to the global community, underlining the urgent need to transform the children and adolescent health agenda on the global scale. So what are the recommendations? Piecemeal approach is needed. What is piecemeal? Now the series which calling for effort to reimagine the delivery of services that will help children thrive mention that a piecemeal approach. Certain catering only to certain age groups may not be the best way to handle the crisis. So delivery services must be given a more focus area. Okay, proper treatment is required. Comprehensive care is needed. The author called for comprehensive care that spans nutrition, preventive health, education, economy, and community support across the age groups from pre-conception to age of 20. Now, the close involvement of families, particularly in offering support right from the stage of pregnancy, continuing through the relevant years, allowing the children to bloom, is also recommended strongly. So evidence-based intervention are needed while calling for scaling up the evidence-based intervention for children under 5 years. The author is highlighted intervention for school-going children and the period of transition from childhood to adolescence. So this includes recommendation to support mental health, address unintentional injuries, non-communicable disease, and neglected tropical diseases also. Okay, so this is all for today's current affair. You can read this, you can download this PDF file from expression.ai. I will send it to sir and he will upload it. And then we'll meet you next Saturday to discuss another important current affair of next week. Okay, so read it and solve some questions also. Okay. So thanks for today. We'll meet you in next class. Thank you, everybody. Take care. Bye.